Just hike the ball. Just hike the ball, y'all. Just hike the ball.
Hey everybody, welcome to Too Much CGI, the show where we talk about all the classic pop culture and nostalgia that you love. We love it, everybody loves it. That's why we're all here together to talk about it. My name is Bill, here as always with my good longtime friend Scott. How are you, Scott?
I'm doing good, man. How about yourself?
I'm doing especially good because football started.
Yes, this was a welcome return of football for sure. This was a great weekend.
So as an Eagles fan, we're supposed to have the team that everybody says is going to be the next dynasty. We are the greatest team. Nobody can touch us. Holy shit, I thought we were just about to lose that game the other day.
I saw that team play for maybe the first two set of downs. They looked incredible. And then they just turned into the Eagles after that.
Yeah, the old-fashioned Eagles. Yeah, well,
exactly.
My friend today said, the sign of a really good team is even when they're playing really bad, they win. So I thought he was a very glass half full kind of guy. So I'm going to stick with him. Yeah. And go with that. But how about this? How about being a Jets fan today?
The most cursed team in the NFL.
Unbelievable. So the Jets spend, $75 million for 2 years.
Yeah.
To get that knucklehead, what's his name?
Aaron Rodgers.
I always called him Brett Favre. I can't believe I still did that. Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah.
What's he out there for 5 minutes?
4 snaps. Never threw the ball.
4 snaps. Never threw the ball. Boom. Tackled. Taken down. Out for season. Guaranteed $75 million whether he plays or doesn't play. Can you imagine being a Jets fan? You think your team is now finally going to do something. You're out there and this happens.
Are you kidding? We're all screwed.
I'm going to take this a step further. The Jets were the featured team for the Hard Knocks television show that they have on HBO.
Oh,
so they were following them all through preseason. So even non-Jets fans were supposedly getting hyped up by this whole show, watching the team build, watching them bring in Aaron Rodgers. And that's the fucking finale right there. Love it.
It is the funniest thing. I mean, it's terribly sad, because it's just sad. It's sad that somebody got hurt. All right. And I'm the guy with the ghoul pool. It's sad that all these people, are fans of him and now they won't get to see him. But it's just like this sport. It's so hard to love a sport where they just destroy people. But I love it so much. I love it. I love football so much. But I don't know what to do. I'm glad these guys make $75 million because they're basically putting themselves in front of moving buses all the time. Like if you're going to fuck yourself up, at least you're getting paid really well. Most actors, I think, are overpaid. For football players, I'm like, how much more can you give them? Because these guys are going to need them for the medical bills.
Yeah, and this was a non-impact injury. This wasn't like he got hit by a freight train. This wasn't like concussion. This wasn't like the guy from the Bills last year that, had cardiac arrest on the field. This was like a strained or broken Achilles, I guess, or it was a leg injury, a tendon injury that has him out for the rest of the year. So this wasn't like a high impact injury.
Yeah, I think I read torn Achilles or something like that.
Torn. Okay. So, I mean, you can put as many safety precautions and things in place, but, I love how we talk about Brett Favre being an old guy. Like, he's 39. I'm 4 years older than he is. Like, granted, I'm not out there playing football, but I guess you have to talk about in football terms, he's an old guy. But, he's 39. 39-year-olds usually heal pretty quick, but in the world of football, most guys are retired by 37, 38. Hell, some guys hung it up in their early 30s very recently. Played 4 years in the league, and then they were like, you know what? I made bank. I'm out.
What do you think most people do when they leave football? I know some try to stay in, right? Tom Brady is going to be an announcer, or he's going to do some kind of thing with commentating. Tony Romo does an amazing job. I never thought he'd be so good, but he's amazing. But most of these other football players, there's only so many coaching jobs. What do they do when they can't work?
Yeah, some have gone to coaching, but the more networks and things that carry football, the more announcing jobs there are, but there's still only so many to go around. I saw J.J. Watt is now doing Fox Sunday Morning, or Fox, they cut away. It's like Michael Strahan, or maybe he was even NBC or ABC, I don't even know, but JJ Watt's out there. He recently retired. And you have guys like Jason Kelsey that just won't retire. You hear about Jason Kelsey, the center for the Philadelphia Eagles? So he and his brother have a podcast, and they should get the fuck out of podcasting. They have a good show, though. But yeah, he announced that he had a documentary team following him around from Amazon Prime, and they were like videotaping all of last season because it was supposed to be his last season. And it was all about how an aging player transitions into that retirement phase, but he just keeps playing. So now they're going to have, actually, I think it drops tonight, Tuesday, September 12th on Amazon. It's a whole documentary about basically Jason Kelsey playing his way from preseason up through the Super Bowl. Supposed to end with his retirement, but he's back. And he looked pretty good yesterday or Sunday. So I'm all for it. And as far as the Eagles go, I'm not smashing the panic button yet or anything. All those starters, none of them were actually playing any of the snaps in preseason. So this was really their first time playing in an actual game setting. Yeah, they have like those mixed practices and things like that, but this is the first time at full speed. So Jalen Hurts, as good as he is, this is his first time seeing it since February when they were in the Super Bowl. So I think there's a lot of things that are going to come back up to speed, fall into place. The new play caller may be questionable. He's got to get his shit together, but we'll see what we end up with. All I know is week 6 against the Jets is looking pretty goddamn good compared to what it was.
You know, we're a show for geeks. You know how many people right now are crawled up under their table waiting for this football talk to end?
I know. I was thinking that.
But everything you said is right. And if you love football, I mean, this is it. Football is pop culture. Sports is pop culture. And it's just when football comes around, if you're a football fan, everything starts to feel different. Everything just gets happier. You start to see little Eagles emblems or whoever your team is. I don't know. I like football season better than any holiday.
Absolutely, man. The weather's, this is my time of year. The weather starts getting cool and football's coming back around, and it's great time for having fire pits and s'mores. And this is my time of year, man.
Well, how about we switch gears here and let's talk about something geeky. Let's talk about...
Let's please the fan base.
Right. Let's talk about Indiana Jones.
You have chosen wisely.
So remember last week I was telling you about all these things I've learned about Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, but I didn't watch the movies. No, I watched YouTubers talk about it. Okay?
Yeah.
They talked about the movies and I stole the information. We made content out of it. I did it again.
Okay. For Indy this time, though.
Yeah, for Indiana Jones. This kind of falls into my what the fuck of the week category, too, because I didn't know that Harrison Ford did a cameo on the Young Indiana Jones show. Remember that
Yeah.
show that was on TV?
I do, yes.
Did you watch it?
I remember seeing episodes, but I wasn't like an avid watcher or anything like that, no.
Yeah, me neither. Like, it was hard to watch. It kind of sucked. And I remember being a huge Indiana Jones fan.
Where can you find it? Can you watch it nowadays?
It might be on Disney now that, like, people don't even realize Indiana Jones is owned by Disney now.
Yeah.
Disney was able to get them in that. Was it part of that Star Wars deal? The
It's all
Lucasfilm
part of
deal?
Lucasfilms. Yeah, they own Lucasfilms, so they own all of it.
Yeah, so I either read or heard or somebody, well, I forget how I just got this in my head, but I think it is now on Disney. Maybe. Maybe not.
Okay.
Maybe it's you got to go to YouTube and find bootlegs. I don't know. But I was watching a show and they were talking about Indiana Jones and they were talking about the series and they were talking about how Harrison Ford made a cameo. And I went, oh, wait a minute, that'd be kind of interesting. So if you go on YouTube, somebody took the 7-minute cameo out of the show and just made it a 7-minute standalone video. That's what I watched. So essentially it's,
Okay.
yeah, so it's Indiana Jones, starts out, he's in a little bit of an adventure in the snow driving a car. Bad guys are after him, right? But it just looks awful. It just looks fucking terribly done, terribly shot. And there's Harrison Ford playing Indiana Jones, and he's got a beard like me. He's got this gray beard, and it's because he was filming the movie where he had that beard, not U.S. Marshals, the Fugitive, and he was just doing this on like a break on the Fugitive.
Right.
So he had to have that beard. So Indiana Jones has a beard. And I won't tell you anymore, but it's kind of like meant to wrap up as its own little 7-minute story. As I assumed the show was really like they would cut away every once in a while and go to old Indiana Jones because it kind of looked like that's what they were doing.
Right,
with
like
the
a
7-minute
flashback
stuff.
kind of thing. Right.
Yeah, so I don't think it was meant to be a 7-minute movie, but this guy who put it together just clipped them all together and made it a 7-minute movie. So go look for that. If you haven't seen it, it's embarrassing. It's embarrassing.
And you're calling it a cameo, but I feel like it was more of like a guest spot. Like this was actually like a guest starring Harrison Ford. A cameo is like he walks by in the background, like, oh, there he is. This was a lot more than that.
Yeah, then you're right. It wasn't a cameo. It was absolutely a guest spot. And I don't know. Like, we've talked about it on this show. When something's so bad, doesn't the talent go, you know what? This is not good. Let's not, like, does somebody with any creative vision at all step up and say, we shouldn't do this? Or does everyone just go, yes, we're going to do it. We're going to do it because the boss says we're going to do it. And some boss with no taste releases this stupid thing, and it's so fucking bad. I'm embarrassed for Indiana Jones, for Harrison Ford. Who's Harrison Ford married to? I'm embarrassed for her.
Callista Flockhart?
Yeah, I'm embarrassed for Ally McBeal. Yes.
You're embarrassed for Callista Flockhart.
I'm embarrassed for everybody in Harrison Ford's orbit.
So I feel like the writers and the producers and the directors of the show were like, holy fuck, we got Harrison Ford. Shitty or not, this is going out. This is the only time I'm going to get to direct Harrison Ford. I'm going for it.
It is stupid. Talk about something that doesn't hold up. So anyway, I was going down a Indiana Jones rabbit hole, and I found a lot of things I didn't know about Indiana Jones, mostly the first movie, but just generally about Indiana Jones. And I wanted to share it with you, Scott, and the audience, if you'll listen, audience.
This isn't like a quiz. Like, I'm not going to have to ask these things or answer these things.
No, I'm just going to read them.
All right.
In my usual poor way of butchering words.
We'll edit that out.
We never do.
That is the edit, Bill.
Yeah. God. You should hear my stammering before the edits. So do you remember the scene where Indiana Jones is standing above with the rocket launcher in Raiders of the Lost Ark, and it's down in a canyon?
He's threatening to blow up the Ark of the
Belloc.
Covenant. And
Yep,
Belloc
and-
says, go ahead and do it. He calls his bluff and he puts it down. Yes, I remember it very vividly.
That's the same canyon that they filmed Star Wars in. That's where the Sand People are. That's where R2-D2 is going by in the beginning.
Sand people. I think you mean Tuscans.
Well, what were they called back then? Sand People. Yeah, they were totally called Sand People.
No, Tuscans. They walk single file to hide their numbers. They scare easy, but they'll be back and in numbers.
You got a point there. How did I come up with Sand People, and why did I always call them the Sand People? They make a mention of that at some point, don't they?
I don't know, but I mean, you could think about that. Like Jawas are also then sand people because they live out in Tatooine Desert. They live on the Dune Sea.
Yeah, no, I figured they were branded the Sand People.
Tuscan Raiders. But go
Tusken
ahead.
Raiders. Anyway,
I'm undoing all the football talk with all my hardcore Star Wars nerdery right now. So I'm just balancing out this yin and yang thing.
no, it's good. We need to do this. That's why our show exists. We have a role in fandom.
Yes.
Now you know what our role is. But was I wrong? I mean, have you heard people call them Sand People? Or was this the first time you
I
ever
have.
Okay.
I was busting your balls. But yeah, I've heard them called sand people. But yeah, I did not know that was the same canyon. That's interesting.
Yeah. I thought I was losing my mind there for a minute. Remember the scene where Indiana Jones comes out, Raiders of the Lost Ark, and the guy's spinning that big samurai sword, spinning it around, and
Yes.
Indy just fucking shoots him. So there's a story behind that. They're filming that scene, and because of the location they're in, the food wasn't so good. Everybody on the everybody on
water.
the crew,
It was actually
it might
the
have been
water.
the water. Yeah, got dysentery.
Yeah, the hotel they were staying at, they were all drinking bottled water, but the ice that they put in the water was coming straight out of the tap, so they all got dysentery. So they were all like sweating
Unbelievable.
profusely. So rather than do the whole choreographed fight scene, Harrison Ford, in typical Harrison Ford fashion, I believe, just pulled out the revolver, shot him dead. Seems like an indie thing to do.
Well, apparently on set, he was feeling like shit. And when you see him, he looks like shit. So he said to George, how about I just shoot him? Like, I don't want to do this scene. Nobody wants to do this scene. And George said, yeah, that's a great idea. That's a funny idea. Let's do it. Marion wasn't supposed to be in the end.
They're going to kill her off?
She was just not going to be there. She was only written in the beginning. And it was actually George Lucas's wife. Her name is, oops, I didn't write down the note of his ex-wife's name, but she was an editor. So she was really in the movie. She was really into pacing and storytelling. And she's like, you got to keep her around. So if there was no Marion, it would have just been Indy tied to the pole. That would have been a kind of a totally different ending. Wouldn't have felt the same at all.
Well, the whole thing with him telling her not to look and don't open your eyes and all that, like she was there for him to speak that exposition. So what was he going to do? Just close his eyes and pantomime how important it was to not look?
Yeah, but he was tied up, so mouth it. So Lucas didn't actually want Harrison Ford for this. So he had already worked with Harrison on Star Wars, but right before that, do you remember the movie that Lucas directed with Harrison Ford? It was a Happy Days type movie.
American Graffiti.
You got it. So George Lucas didn't want to hire him a third time and be like, one of these directors that always works with the same cast. So he's like, get me somebody else. So he gets Magnum PI himself. He gets Tom Selleck.
Tom Selleck. Really?
Tom Selleck. So Tom Selleck comes in to interview. Yeah, it's a job interview. Come on in and interview. He comes into audition for Indiana Jones. And if you Google, you can find it. It's online. You can see Tom Selleck trying to be Indiana Jones, and it looks weird. But the thing was, he also had this Magnum PI thing going on. So Magnum PI was in an option, meaning nobody had decided to truly pick it up yet. But as soon as they had heard that Steven Spielberg and George Lucas were looking at their guy Tom Selleck for a movie, they said, this guy's a hot property. Green light Magnum PI now. So George said, well, I guess I got to go back to Harrison Ford a third time. He's my backup.
And look how commonplace it is now to have directors use the same set of actors. If we were talking about Judd Apatow and, Quentin Tarantino, and like these people just go back to the well over and over. Christopher Nolan, he's another one.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't mind that at all.
No.
George Lucas insisted on the aliens in that Crystal Skull.
Crystal Skull?
Yeah. So everyone hated that.
There were some horribly written and proposed scripts that had a lot more to do with aliens. So he was trying to get aliens into Indiana Jones for quite a while, and it finally happened in Crystal Skull.
Yeah, it says here from an interview with Spielberg, Spielberg's like, George was pushing me to do aliens because this is my Spielberg impression. George was pushing me to do aliens. You ever hear him? He talks like really kind of in that high pitch.
Yeah.
I love his voice. He was trying to push me to do aliens, but I didn't want to do aliens in it. But he was like, if you make this movie, you could kind of base it around that alien fear in like the 50s and the 40s and the 50s. So that was George's idea for aliens in this. He's like, that's going to make it special because every movie in the past has picked on a big theme from the past, like whether it's Nazi stuff. So now they're going to try to pick up on the aliens thing. And it just didn't work. It didn't work for anybody. Nobody liked it.
Well, I also read that Spielberg did not want to do Aliens because he had just done, or not just done, but he had done Close Encounters. He's like, I did the alien thing. I don't want to do more aliens. So he was doubly resistant to it.
That makes sense. So the aliens looked a lot like those 50s drawn aliens, which looked a lot like the third kind aliens. And yeah, all right. George has a thing for aliens. Somebody ought to look into that.
What's happened on Skywalker Ranch?
Do you know there was a prequel series being thought about for Disney Plus?
I didn't know it, but I'm not surprised to hear it.
Think there'll be one now?
I hope not.
I haven't seen this new movie yet. I know it didn't do well. As soon as it hits Disney Plus, I'm going to see it. I'm not going to pay money for it because nobody said it was good.
I think it's out there now.
On Disney Plus?
I think so.
I know it's available to rent for a cost, but I didn't think it was on to Disney Plus yet.
That might be what I saw. Okay, stand corrected. Give it a week.
And give it a week, yeah. Here's my last one. George wanted to call it Indiana Smith. Spielberg said, no, that's stupid. Indiana Smith. He goes, how about Indiana Jones? Spielberg goes, all right. So evidently, Indiana was George Lucas's dog's name. So the joke at the end of part 3, when Sean Connery goes, Indiana, that was the dog's name, is really funny because now you know where that joke comes from.
I just love Salah's reaction to that. He's like, the dog.
That's great. Oh, when the movies were good. When the Indiana Jones movies were good. Well, that was it. Those were, you did pretty good. You knew like 3 of them.
Yeah, no, it was, especially for that Raiders of the Lost Ark, that was my favorite of the original 3. Close tie with the third one. I really did like the one with the Holy Grail and the Knights Templar and picking, he chose poorly, and that whole thing. I really did like that one as well. But number 1, I mean, that's what hooked me on the series. That's what hooked everybody on the series. That's what led us to tolerate number 2, because number 2 was not great, but I still watch it. Temple of Doom was questionable.
I love it. I watch it all the time. I mean, I'm one of them people that look at the first 3 movies and think all 3 of them are great. Same with Star Wars. I know everyone's like, I hate Return of the Jedi, or I hate this. No, all 3 of those original ones are great. There's not many things from the 80s that are always great for me. Like Aliens has a couple clunkers here and there, but
yeah.
No, give me all those Indiana Jones. I know they were different in tone, especially the second one. I heard like Spielberg was getting a divorce and he was really angry. And
yeah, it was really dark. Yeah.
But I'm okay with it because I grew up with them. And that's how they imprinted on me. That's how I love them now. So don't remake them. Don't try to change them. They're good the way they are.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying, but looking at the 3 of them together, either Indy or Star Wars, one of these things is not like the others. Like, one doesn't stack up. I don't hate it. I still like it. Do I love it? I don't know. As a package, sure. As a standalone movie, maybe not as much.
I like Short Round.
Kiwi Kwan. Yeah. He might be coming up later in this show.
All right. Well, I think that's enough Indiana Jones talk. We've talked a little football. We've talked a little Indiana Jones. I forgot to do the bumpers. We jumped right into it. Hey, everybody, don't forget, if you want to interact with us a bit, you can go to Twitter or X or whatever you want to call it. You can call it anything you want. Just go there and look for us. We are at Too Much CGI. You can also go to toomuchcgi.com. You can send us an email there. We can read it on the show if it's good. If it's a virus, you could fuck up our computers. Sure.
Yeah, I mean, our tech is so solid to begin with. We wouldn't even notice another virus in here. What the hell?
Got 22 firewalls. Try me. Don't try me. You're probably a lot better at IT than me.
Oh, man.
I was struggling with figuring out my phone today. I was like, how do I get my... I held my phone up to the gas pump at the Wawa. If you guys don't know what Wawa is, it's a convenience store on the East Coast here. And like... it read the phone, and I didn't have to take the credit card out of my wallet anymore. And I'm just like, I know that this is stuff that everybody does, and I just realized is a thing to do. Now I know I'm old. Like, that was when I would laugh at my dad. I'm like, you don't know what you're doing. You don't even know how to use a VCR. Now I don't know how to use a gas pump. So, shit. What else can I say but shit? I'm getting older.
Shit.
That's karma coming around to bite you in the ass, buddy. I got a little bit of a what the fuck I read this week. You know, we talked last week how this strike has just all of our news pretty dry. So all kinds of different things are coming across my feed. Football, baseball being one of them. I won't bore you with my nerdy baseball talk, but food is probably number 3 in my topics. Probably nerdery, sports, food, in that order. And how do you feel about hot, spicy food, Bill? Are you a spicy food fan?
I was really into the fact that I could handle a lot of spicy food more than my friends, but I was never like, I can't wait to go out and get spicy food. And the older I get, the less I want it. So some buffalo sauce, some hot sauces I like, some I just don't care for at all.
You're kind of like a Frank's Red Hot, maybe a Tabasco kind of guy, that kind of thing?
Yeah, what's the orange kind? The habaneros?
Habaneros or orange, yeah. Yeah, they're pretty hot.
Love those on my eggs.
All right, so you go pretty high. How do you feel about sriracha?
I don't know much about it. Like, I never had food where sriracha was an option. I don't know if that's just because of where I grew up around Philly. Like, it wasn't big around here. But I know people love sriracha.
Yeah, it's a big Thai food. Like, they put it in a lot of Vietnamese food as well. Certainly more of an Asian flair to the hot sauce, but still made with peppers. Read some interesting things about sriracha this week. Remember a few years back they tried to make bacon a big pop culture thing? Like you can go into like websites and they sell like bacon socks and like bacon band-aids, and like bacon was like a thing that they were trying to make happen. Remember that?
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. Bacon chocolate. Yeah.
Yes. They tried doing it with sriracha as well. And people really bought it. You can buy sriracha t-shirts, and it has like the Hoi Fong. Hoi Fong is the original company that created sriracha. They fucked up. They never copyrighted the name sriracha. So now you can buy sriracha put out by, I don't know, Heinz. Tabasco has their own sriracha. Like pretty much anybody that makes a sauce or a condiment has their own sriracha. So Hoi Fong lost probably millions of dollars by not copywriting sriracha. And it became this pop culture thing because of the internet, I guess. I don't know why. I, for one, think sriracha is a little bit overrated as far as hot sauces go. And I do really like spicy food, hot food, things like that. But there's soon going to be a sriracha shortage in the world. You heard anything about this?
No.
Yeah, so the peppers that they use to make sriracha are grown in central Mexico, and climate conditions there have the crop just not producing as much as it used to. So there is going to be a sriracha shortage, much like there was a bourbon shortage a few years back. So you might want to start hoarding sriracha if you're a fan.
My vacation was in central Mexico. And
you see any
for
peppers?
us Americans, we don't. I saw everything. I mean, I don't know what I didn't see. It was in the jungle. I mean, we were picking mangoes out of the bushes and eating them. And one of the things that the guys told me who were around there, and some of them, had never seen an American before, but they were like, yeah, the cartel, it's a way of life around here. And now the cartel is moving into the limes and, fruits, agriculture, stuff like that.
Really?
Fruits. Yeah. So it's not about drugs. It's not just about people. Like I guess they're also trading in human trafficking. But now it's like one of their biggest things that they're smuggling and running illegally and basically overrunning the government because they're tougher and meaner. I don't know. To basically make money on is fucking fruit.
Wow.
So maybe peppers is next. I don't know.
Well, in reading about hot, spicy food, I also came across this article. How familiar are you with the One Chip Challenge?
Oh, yeah. You told me about the One Chip. You've done the One Chip Challenge.
I did the 2022 One Chip Challenge. So every year, this company, Pocky, Paqui, they make other like snack chips, non-fatal snack chips. But once a year, they'll come out with this one chip, and it comes in a foil seal. It looks like a condom almost. It comes in like a foil sealed packaging, and then it's shipped in a box shaped like a coffin. And every year, it's a different blend of peppers. Last year, it was Scorpion Pepper and Carolina Reaper, and it was fucking hot. So the challenge is you eat the chip, and then you see how far you can go, how long you can go, rather, without eating or drinking anything. I went about an hour and 13 minutes. The only reason I stopped was because I was at lunch, and it was my lunchtime, so I was like, okay, well, now I eat, and I already won $50 in a bet because I was the last man standing. But this year, Pocky came out with the chip. Comes out around every September. This year's chip is, again, Carolina Reaper and also some kind of Viper chili, which is, I was told, are the kind of chilies that you can get like in General Tso's chicken that you're not supposed to eat because they like blast your ass off. Well, they're pulling it from the store shelves because high schoolers and grade schoolers are getting them and taking them to school. One kid in Texas died. May have been allergic to some of the peppers or the nightshades or whatever they put on there, but they're pulling it from retail store shelves. I guess you can still buy it online, but the One Chip Challenge might be a thing of the past.
Man, it always takes one person to die to ruin it for the rest of us.
How can I make money for putting my body in harm's way and volunteering to injure myself? I mean, now it's out the window.
Join the NFL.
That was my retirement plan.
That's pretty crazy. Like, that's the weirdest thing I've heard all day. You're telling me that the One Chip Challenge might go away because it's too dangerous for society. Oof.
I mean, I almost have to ask, where were the parents, And my son, he's in 6th grade. He told me that kids have taken it to his school. And they had to go talk to the teacher. And I guess you could just buy it at convenience stores like Wawa, like you mentioned before, and other things. But I guess that's what they're yanking from the store shelves because these kids just stop in there on their way to school and buy it and then just take it into class and maybe sometimes even slip into people's food without them knowing. I mean, that sounds like a gag I would have done back in high school.
Yeah, where are the parents? They're supposed to make sure you don't do things like that.
Yeah.
And I knew just how fucked we were when I was playing Grand Theft Auto when that came out, and I heard the little 12-year-olds playing. And then in the background, you could hear their moms and dads walking around the room, so they know the kid's playing it. And you know they are okay with it. And I'm just like, wow, there are some parents that just do not care. And if you haven't played that game, like, it's not just violent, it's pornographic.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. There's a lot going on there that's definitely rated M for mature.
Stay in your bubble, everybody. Stay where it's safe. World's on fire. What do you want to talk about today, Scott?
In trying to come up with an idea for this week's show, I came across an article put out there by MovieWeb. I forwarded this along your way. I think we can talk about this, riff on this, share our opinions. 15 TV shows that defined the 80s. It's a pretty bold claim, saying that these shows here, 15 of them nonetheless, defined the 80s. So I wrote down the movies here, did some research of my own, and sent it to you. I want to get your takes on some of them. So let's shoot the shit about TV in the 80s. We often talk about what you should be watching and what you are watching. Let's talk about what you were watching 30 years ago.
This was a controversial list.
Yeah.
I think that's what I wrote back to you. So yeah. I like this. Let's go through it. But I have some thoughts about things that are missing.
I have some omissions here, too, that I thought should have made the list over top of things that should not be on this list.
Yeah.
So we'll start from the top. Again, this is from MovieWeb. I believe they had these in order of importance, but I paid less attention to the numbering. Like, I'm not bitching about where something ranks versus something else. That's not what I'm about here. But I'll go through each show. I'll share some of the things I found about these shows, and we'll shoot the shit. So number 15, Knight Rider. Police action drama that ran from 1982 to 1986, starring David Hasselhoff as Michael Knight. He was a police officer, drove a car called KITT. It was an AI car. It was a 1982 Pontiac Trans Am. You know that KITT was an acronym, Bill?
I do know that. I used to remember what it was.
Oh, I was going to ask that.
When he had to fight his enemy, was car, and that stood for something, and that's what I learned, that KITT stood for something. No, I'll never remember what it was.
So KITT stands for Knight Industries 2000, KITT. And when I read that, I knew it was an acronym, but when I read what the meaning was, I don't think I ever knew that TT was 2000. That's bad.
And if I ever knew that, why didn't I question that stupidity? Like, that is...
So, about KITT, I mean, this whole show, I mean, yeah, Hasselhoff had a role. Michael Knight was the main character. Like I said, he was a police officer who went around solving crimes and beating up on bad guys and fighting for justice. But really, the star of this show was KITT, right?
Oh, 100%. This show is, without a doubt, my favorite show. And when they tried to reboot this thing, I was like, well, I got to tune in. I'm the person they made it for, and it never worked. It's so sad because this is just, it's so much fun. It is just so much fucking fun if you do it right. If the people are likable. And that's what you got to have.
That's a big piece.
Yes. You got to have David Hasselhoff. It's got to be in the 80s, and it's got to be this campy. They try Absolutely. It now. They try to put some serious tone to it. They try to do whatever else to it. It just doesn't work. It's not the time. So this is one of those things that, yes, I will vote yes. This did define the 80s. It was perfectly timed. Wouldn't work in any other decade, but right then.
There is no argument for me that this show belongs on this list. 100% belongs there. 15 could have been up higher. Like I said, I'm not paying attention to the rankings. I'm not considering these rankings. If they made the list, they made the list. I'm good with that. I did find some amazing facts about KITT. How quick do you think in universe KITT went 0 to 60?
So the real car?
In universe. So this is like in the world of Knight Rider. Not like on set. Like in the fictional universe, how quick do you think how long do you think it took KITT to go 0 to 60?
I'm going to guess with that turbo boost button, it's probably as fast as those new Teslas. So 3 seconds.
Close. It was 2 seconds.
Wow.
It could do the quarter mile in 4.4 seconds. So it can go straight down the drag strip in 4.4 seconds. With turbo, I'm glad you mentioned turbo. With turbo equipped, the top speed was 200 miles per hour. And in later episodes, later seasons, he had, quote, super pursuant mode, where he can go into those modes on the dashboard there. Super pursuant mode, it's believed he can go over 300 miles per hour in a 1982 Trans Am.
When did he, remember I think it was the last season they started to add effects to Kit, like wings came out. Then I bet he could go faster.
Like the spoiler came up. That may have been super pursuant mode. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I remember that was towards the end. It's like, uh-oh, we're running thin here.
I didn't remember when I read the word super pursuant mode. I was like, I don't think I remember that, but I do remember these extra effects, and I can guarantee you they were the same thing.
Yeah. It's such a good show. I still, to this day, love David Hasselhoff. He's so perfect in that show. It's great.
The theme song alone screams 80s. I mean, that is what Synthwave's all about. Synthwave's just trying to recapture. Didn't.
1,000% true.
So good.
True. One of the Synthwave guys I listen to, I think it's Mitch Murder. You like that name. You told me before you like that.
That's right.
He does a cover of the Knight Rider theme, and it's like dead on perfect, and I love it. You know what? I'm even pretty sure we used it as a theme song one day way back in the... Yeah, we've been doing this forever. I can't remember what we did 30 episodes ago.
We're coming up on a year here, man.
Whew. How about it?
All right. So Knight Rider belongs. How about we go on to number 14? The Golden Girls. The sitcom. Sitcom ran from 1985 to 1992. Based on your reaction there, I take it you have feelings about the Golden Girls?
I watched the Golden Girls. Like, they amused me. It was fine. But is this the 80s? Is this an icon of the 80s? Yeah. Is it the best representation of the 80s? I don't think so. I don't think it's on the top 15 list. I think it belongs on maybe a top 30 list.
Okay. All right. So to remind people out there that may not be as familiar with Golden Girls as what Bill is here, this was a story of 4 previously married women who lived together in Miami, very supportive of each other. Main characters were Blanche, Dorothy, Rose, and Sophia, who is Dorothy's mother, played by Rue McClanahan, B. Arthur, Betty White, and Estelle Getty. And they were funny. I got to say, most of the comic relief came from Betty White. She would always share these stories about her time growing up in St. Olaf, and it was always the most backward country thing, like country bumpkin thing you could possibly imagine. But it was always a funny moral or a funny story or just a good setup to have one of the other women just come back and just like make an ass out of her. But she was the comic relief, and Betty White, to me, this was Betty White. This is how I will always remember Betty White.
I know Estelle Getty, who played the old lady, wasn't even that much older than the others. And I always thought that was kind of fun.
Yeah. And when I heard that as a kid, I was like, no way. She's like old. She's like that woman's mom. Like, I didn't understand how makeup worked.
She's got gray hair. You can't fake that.
If we were playing a game and I had to have you guess the Golden Girls, I would say to you, 1980s middle-aged Sex in the City. That's exactly what this is. Sex in the City is just trying to recapture what the Golden Girls had in the 80s.
I will believe you because I have not watched Sex in the City.
All the characters had their personality. Rue McClanahan's character, Blanche, she was the over-sexualized one. Dorothy was more the straight man. Rose, like I said, she was kind of the comic relief idiot of the whole thing. And Sophia, Estelle Getty, she was really just a hardened old woman who would just tell you how it is. She was everybody's Italian grandma. She'd come in and just tell you exactly what the fuck she thought.
What's your point?
Yeah. Yeah, it was well written, but how long did it last? I don't remember how long it lasted.
So the show was on from 1985 to 1992. So 7 years.
Oh, that's a good run. Yeah, that's a good run.
You know, it had spin-offs.
Yes. Empty Nest.
Empty Nest was a spin-off because they were the neighbors of the Golden Girls. There was also one called Nurses that took place in Miami as well. I'm less familiar with Nurses, but it was still in the same universe. And there was actually a sequel series that came out after the series ended. And I knew nothing about this. Let me share this insight with you. On Wikipedia, doing some research here, the series ended when B. Arthur decided to move on in 1992. Listen to what the finale was. It was a 1 hour long episode where Dorothy meets Blanche's uncle Lucas, who was played by Leslie Nielsen. They get married and they move to Atlanta. Sophia, played by Estelle Getty, her mom, was going to move with them to Atlanta, but decided to stay back in Miami with Blanche and Rose, which led to this spin-off series called The Golden Palace that ran from 92 to 93, in which they sold their house where the four of them were living. They bought a hotel. They ran a hotel in Miami.
This rings a bell.
The finale was watched by 27.2 million people, which at the time was the 17th most watched finale of all time.
This rings a bell. When you said Golden Palace, I'm like, yeah, I do remember. But this is like one of those blips in the back of my brain where it could be just a fever dream. And I made this up. Yeah, I kind of remember this.
This registered nothing to me at all. I was like, Golden Palace? Like, what the fuck? I'd never heard of this.
And this would have been early enough to which I wouldn't have known Leslie Nielsen because I hadn't gone and seen a Naked Gun movie yet. So he wasn't even on my radar, really.
Okay.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, it could have happened. You say it happened. That paper there says it happened.
Well, Wikipedia said it happened. So, yeah, it did happen. So all the exterior shots of the home that they lived in, that home existed down on what they called Residential Street in Disney's MGM Studios backlot. So when you would take the Backlot Studios tour, you would go down the Golden Girls Street and you can see their home. It's now leveled and part of Star Wars Galaxy's Edge. All right, number 13. Murphy Brown ran from 1988 to 1998. It was a sitcom starring Candice Bergen. She was a journalist. The whole story focused on the staff that produced this magazine. I didn't watch this at all. This was one of those shows where it's like, well, Simpsons are over. I'm changing the channel.
I watched too much of it. It was terrible. It was just one of those shows that were on at a time where I happened to be near a TV. And I was like, I hate this show. This should not be on the list. Like, I don't know that anybody remembers Murphy Brown. I just don't know.
Not only did the article name Murphy Brown, it named it as being the one show that is possibly the best written sitcom of all time on this list. Which really, I mean, I don't know enough to argue it, but this was not on my radar, so we're going to move on.
Yeah. And frankly, we ought to skip the next one on this list. Do you know why?
Well, let me get to it, and then we'll bitch about it.
All right.
So number 12, The Simpsons, 1989 to present. I don't know that this belongs on the list. It was on there. I mean, the Christmas episode came out in 1989. So it came out December 1989. This barely made the 80s. This is much more of a 90s thing to me than anything. It took a satirical look at every cultural and pop cultural reference that's, over the past 30 years, they covered everything. Practically every guest star imaginable has been on this show, either playing themselves or doing voiceover work for another character. The longer it goes on, the worse it gets. This is a show that's been going on for so long, I can't even limp with it till the end. I wish they'd take Old Yeller out behind the shed and just put it down, because it's not getting better. It's actually just, sullying the good name that The Simpsons used to bring to mind for me. So there is a joke out there that South Park covered pretty good where The Simpsons did everything. So Simpsons did it. They predicted Trump running for president. They predicted everything. It's crazy how many things out there The Simpsons predicted just in coming up with stories. Over the past 30 plus years now, they've been coming up with these stories and just randomly stumbling into things that actually happened and came true.
Well, I know they had for a while, they had like Conan O'Brien. They had really great writers, like Ivy League comedy writers, like people that would have gone to the National Lampoon if that were still around. So this show had that, and it's not an 80s show. Nope, it does not represent the 80s, but it did have just stellar writing. So you're right. I haven't seen this in 15 years. I don't think I've seen anything new in 15 years. And when somebody says, hey, it's still on, I go, that's fucking weird. Like, why? Because who's watching it? Did somebody sign like a 30-year deal and now they have to stick to it and nobody else is watching it? I don't know. This show is still on the air.
Loved the show. Loved the show. Loved what the show was. You're right. Conan wrote some great episodes. Bart Gets a Girlfriend. I think he may have wrote the one with the burlesque house. I mean, great episodes. Great storytelling. Great writers. Great character building.
Yeah.
They've just done it all and they have no place to go.
And it was the kind of comedy too that was, when it came out, it was really smart. There's a name for this kind of comedy, and it eludes me, but it's comedy where it has jokes pointed at adults and it has jokes pointed at kids. So the kids didn't get the adult jokes, and the adults were able to look over the kid jokes. Or if you were like me and I became an adult watching this show, I was laughing at the kid jokes because I'm just still a big kid. So it had a little bit of something for everybody. It was just the first cartoon that did that. And that's really why it did so well. And the jokes were deep. Some of them were really, you had to be caught up on a lot of intellectual things to even understand some of the jokes. So it was a very interesting show.
One thing it did for me, it really did do satire of like the Twilight Zone and stories that, like all the Treehouse of Horrors, they were all just Simpsonized versions of the Twilight Zone. At the time, I didn't know that, but it was a gateway show to get me to watch the Twilight Zone and actually go back and appreciate what that was. So it was really good writing. It was really good introduction to older material that just would have been off my radar without them. So I appreciate them for what they were. They represent the 80s. I don't think they belong on this list at all. Came too late.
And frankly, either does the next on your list.
I was just going to say that. So next up here, number 11, Seinfeld. Exact same reason. Ran 1989 to 1998. This barely sniffed the 80s.
And if you remember, its first year was bad. It was called the Seinfeld Chronicles, and it wasn't working.
Yeah,
and
I remember
they figured something out a couple of years in, and it took. They had changed the name to Seinfeld. I don't know that was the magic ingredient, but yeah. So it's not an 80s show. Movie Web, you really screwed up this time. I mean, this is one of the worst articles you've ever done.
I think it's worth talking about, though. It is still a good show. Did you watch Seinfeld, 80s or not?
I did. It was great, but it's one of those things to me that it just never stuck to me. It's like how everybody loves U2. I know they're great, but they never stuck to me. This is one of them shows that just bounces right off me.
So Seinfeld, definitely created by Larry David and Jerry Seinfeld. Seinfeld plays himself and the character of George Costanza, Jerry's best friend in the show, very much based on Larry David's real life. Famously, it's the show about nothing. And mainly it got that term show about nothing because it truly took everyday occurrences of real life and just turned them into ridiculous situations. Like, for me to sit here and tell you an episode, it would sound stupid as shit if I gave you the premise of an episode. But when you watch that episode, it was enthralling storytelling. You would watch it. People could not wait for the next week's episode to come out to see what they were going to do next.
Well, they tackled things that people didn't generally talk about all the time, too. So
Sure.
One of the things Jerry has is like, he was dating a lot of women. I also, as a young man, would date a lot of women. And you find people, and I'm weird. If somebody does something that I don't like, it's over. It's over. Like, you know, you smell funny, it's done. It ends that day. He's that same way. And seeing him kind of get weird with the dates, you know.
So you're
like
referring to like man hands and the close talker and the high talker and everything he found wrong with these women to break up with them?
Yes. So I would see that and I'd be like, I'm Jerry Seinfeld. This guy sees me.
And it was funny because in the show, he really played a famous comedian that would go on late night talk shows and travel. And, you know, all the episodes basically would open up with him doing his stand-up skit at a comedy club. And by and large, that was the least interesting thing about the show. His fame as a character and an exchange of himself in real life really had nothing to do. It was really the day-to-day things, like an episode about renting a car or waiting for a table at a Chinese restaurant or meeting your friend's overbearing father for the first time. These were all like ideas that were like main topics of, and again, I'm reading these things and it sounds stupid as shit, but when you watch those episodes, the stuff that happened that went into that was just fantastic. Really an ensemble cast. In addition to Jerry Seinfeld playing himself, we had George, who was played by Jason Alexander. Elaine, played by Julia Louis-Dreyfus, and Kramer, played by Michael Richards.
One of the most amazing career suicides ever. Michael Richards. Man, you haven't heard from him since that day.
May have been the first guy I know was canceled.
You don't know what they were talking about, Google it.
Yeah.
This next one I love.
Fully belongs on this list, no question. The A-Team, 1983 to 1987. Action
Perfect.
show, fantastic. So 4 Vietnam War vets are on the run from military police for a crime they didn't commit. As the opening theme song, I think, even told you, right? That was the voiceover. So they travel around as mercenaries, taking on missions and fighting for justice. And it was, again, the cast of characters. We had Hannibal, played by George Peppard, B.A. Baracus by Mr. T. I had him down as, always knew him as Mad Dog Murdoch, but they had him as like Howlin' Mad Murdoch.
Oh,
His
yeah.
initials were HM. I always thought Mad Dog, so I fucked that up. But Mad Dog Murdoch, played by Dwight Schultz, and Templeton Faceman Peck, who I always just knew as Face because he was kind of like the con man of the group, played by Dirk Benedict.
Dirk Benedict.
You'll appreciate this. You like the behind the scenes kind of stuff. During the running of this show, many people have come forward saying that George Peppard, who played Hannibal, could not fucking stand Mr. T. Because George was a formal actor and Mr. T was more famous. And then when it came out that Mr. T made more money than George, shit really hit the fan. And Dirk Benedict, who played Face, came out saying that, oh yeah, on set, like he wouldn't even talk to Mr. T. I would be a go-between between the two of them, and he wouldn't even call him Mr. T. He would refer to him as that guy with all the gold. So, like, you really have to be fucking spiteful to take a guy whose name is 3 letters and turning it into that guy with all the gold. That's pretty fucking spiteful.
I like it, but you got to remember George Peppard. He was from the old acting, guard. Like he was a movie star, and then it wasn't going so good. I guess. I mean, I don't know. Didn't study this guy at all. But now suddenly you're on TV, and now you're not even the biggest deal. Like that is getting your ass kicked twice. Moving from movies to TV was a bad look. And then with MTV, when Mr. T is more popular, when everything is more popular than George Peppard, yeah, he'd probably be pretty pissed off and embarrassed.
Ego's a hell of a thing, man.
I like that story. Thanks for sharing that. I didn't know that. I'll enjoy knowing that next time I watch the A-Team.
Here's some other things to look forward to while you're watching the A-Team. How about the guest stars that they would have? Do you remember any guest stars?
Not really, no.
Let me name some for you. George Amos, who we know from Beastmaster and Coming to America and many other things. Boy George was on the A-Team. Isaac Hayes. Hulk Hogan playing himself, accompanied by the British Bulldog and Mr. Wonderful, Paul Orndorff, who you may remember from our wrestling episode. Ernie Hudson, our own, Winston Zedmore, he was in there. Joe Namath, Pat Sajak, and Vanna White playing themselves. I guess there was a Wheel of Fortune episode. And Marky Post, who we all know and love from Night Court.
I gotta see the Wheel of, like, did the A-Team van come flying through the studio and the letters, go everywhere? What a weird crossover.
That's by a vowel.
The one thing I do remember, this was Army stuff. This was machine guns. And as a little kid in the 80s, I ran around with my friends playing machine guns. Like we were into this. And, at our age, when this was out, we weren't really watching those Chuck Norris missing in action, So this was the TV version of what was going on the big screen. But what I never really realized as a kid is every time they shot with these big machine guns, like they never hit anybody. They were terrible shots. So it's like, why were you even shooting? But it was so much explosions and just stunt work. It was a stunt show is all it was.
In doing research for this episode, I came across something that completely eluded me when I was a kid. So I think I asked you when we were doing our theme song game way back in the early days of the show here, who was your favorite character of the A-Team? And I think you said B.A. Baracus. Is that correct? Is that correct?
Probably, yeah. He's always been my favorite.
All right. Howlin' Mad Murdoch was my favorite. He was the wild card. He was the loose cannon. And in reading his backstory in this thing, so everybody had their role. Hannibal was the leader, and Face was kind of like the con man. Like I said, he was like the grease man. He would always go out and represent the group, try to get them in good with the townspeople, shit like that. He was also their money man, so he was always like financing their shit. B.A. Baracus was a mechanic, a driver. He was a heavy demolitions expert. That was his role in the group. And Murdoch was a pilot. He could fly anything. That's what he did when he was in the military. There was some backstory. They were all a special forces unit of the Green Berets. Do you know the crime that they didn't commit?
Murder!
No. So they were in Vietnam. This was heavily tied to the Vietnam War, and their commanding officer ordered them to rob the Hanoi Bank to end the war, and it did. They were successful. But the Viet Cong killed that commander, so they were now viewed as war criminals because all people see is that they robbed the bank. There's no evidence that they were ordered to rob the bank in order to defund the Vietnamese and the Viet Cong army. So now they're trying to clear their name the whole time they're fighting evil or fighting injustice in these small towns out in California.
So they unknowingly robbed the bank?
No, they knew they were robbing the bank. They were following orders to do so. So the fact that they were ordered to do so would have cleared their name. They didn't just do this as soldiers of fortune. You know what I mean? Like, they weren't over there just trying to become war profiteers. They were actually following orders in doing what they did.
So the theme song says, a crime they did not commit. However, it was a crime they did commit.
It was a crime they were ordered to do. All's fair in love and war, my man.
Sorry, Judge. No, I was told to shoot that guy. Clearly, I'm innocent.
It's true. But going back to what I learned about Hannibal, so he was an expert pilot, and he actually crashed while in the Vietnam War, and he mentally snapped. So he actually lived at a VA mental hospital. So anytime that they needed him to fly or do something for the A-team, they would have to go basically break him out of the hospital, which was something that Face would go and pose as a relative or somebody taking him out on leave. So, Mad Dog, or Howlin' Mad, whatever you want to call him, Murdoch, he truly was PTSD, mentally unstable, and that completely, I just thought he was a goofball while I was watching it. The fact that there was like actual mental illness and trauma involved with this was completely lost on me when I was watching this show as a kid.
I'm thinking I identified the most with him, so that makes sense.
So there you have it.
I told you I met him once, right? Dwight Schultz.
Yeah, you didn't know who he was.
Sat next to him, talked to him about halfway through the dinner. I was like, what? I know who you are. Yeah, it was a great show. They tried to remake that movie. I don't know if you saw that.
Yeah.
I mean, not even hating the movie, but again, time and place. Time and place. Does this represent the 80s? Abso-friggin-lutely.
Moving on the list here. Number 9, we got Star Trek: The Next Generation. Ran from 1987 to 1994. Best thing I can say about this, I mean, I did watch it. I was a fan. Patrick Stewart is Jean-Luc Picard. I think I like Picard more than I like Captain Kirk.
I remember the show. I remember it would be a coin flip when it came on if I were to stay and watch it. Because sometimes I was like, man, it's that serious Star Trek shit. Like, I know it's tongue-in-cheek and not that serious, but I was always into, like, the fluffier action comedies or the sillier, sitcoms or...
It did get pretty heavy. I mean, there was some cerebral things going on there. I remember when it first came on, I was like, that's the guy from Reading Rainbow. Because Geordi LaForge was played by LeVar Burton.
That's Whoopi Goldberg.
It was Whoopi Goldberg.
It was always special when she was on. You're like, whoa, she legitimized the show in such a way. A movie star is on the show. I did enjoy the crossover when they did the movie.
Yeah.
I think it was called Generations.
Yep. But yeah, I mean, I watched a lot of The Next Generation. 87 to 94, I think I was probably in my teens, so I don't know that this was in the tail end of the 80s, but is this like an 80s show? I don't know.
No, it didn't hit me that way.
Yeah.
This is another 90s show. Yeah, but there's 3 years here, but...
The next one here is definitely an 80s show. Miami Vice. Police drama ran from 1984 to 1989. This thing lived solely in the 80s.
It invented that purple retro look.
Oh, forget about it. Blazers with pop collars and turned up cuffs. You fucking know it, man. Crockett and Tubbs, played by Don Johnson and Philip Michael Thomas. By the way, Philip Michael Thomas, 3 first names. That's 80s right there, man.
Yeah, yeah.
Undercover Vice detectives living in Miami, hence the name Miami Vice. They're undercover. They have to look the look. So they have to have the cars, the clothes, the style, the boats, the houses. This was an 80s extravaganza.
And I didn't watch any of it.
No?
It was too serious for me. I was too young. I was just under the right age. The only thing I know about this is the video game that was on the Commodore 64 that would have this really bad Commodore version of the music, of the synthwave music, and I would drive this car around in the game. So I knew it was a great show. I just knew it was not for me. It was for my parents. And I also know that Frank Zappa, my favorite musician, played a drug dealer in one of the episodes. So
I could see that. That's funny. I can't read the title without hearing the theme song. That synth, like that electric drum intro. So, I think that belongs on the list. Watch it or not, it's definitely 80s, man. This was all about the 80s. This thing, I can't see it without thinking of Neon.
Yeah, absolutely right. South Beach still looks exactly like Miami Vice left it.
Number 7 does not belong. I'm saying it right now before I even announce it. MASH, 1972 to 1983. This thing limped into the 80s, but I do not consider this to be an 80s show. I watched a lot of this in the 80s, but the Korean War was 1950 to 1953. So this is already 30 years after the fact, and it just seems like it's not 80s culture. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I know it was on a lot. My father watched it. It's like one of my earliest memories is my dad loved MASH, and I would always get kind of bummed out by it because it was, it was dark. It was like people were always getting hurt, and I didn't want to see that, so I avoided it. But I do remember it enough to know, wow, that was a really good show.
Yeah, it was great. It was a great show, and there would always be like a lighthearted comedy moment between Hawkeye and somebody else. Next thing you know, the announcer comes across as like, incoming choppers, and they fly in like 20 injured, bleeding out, dead, half dead soldiers that have to go into the operating room and work on, and shit gets real serious, and they're like having serious conversations while they're operating over top of bloody hands, and it's just a whole fucking thing.
Yeah.
Not 80s.
No. Hawkeye's making jokes, fucking it all up. Everyone's screwing up.
And goddamn that Frank Burns. Get a goddamn sense of humor, Frank.
Radar.
Hot Lips Houlihan. BJ Honeycutt.
Hot Lips. Yeah. Hot Lips Houlihan.
Hot Lips Houlihan.
Yeah, my dad loved that fucking show.
If I call my dad right now, he's probably watching it. Moving on to number 6. Family Ties. This one belongs. This one ran 1982 to 1989. Follows the Keaton family. And the real thing about this was a liberal family with a very conservative son, and Alex P. Keaton being played by Michael J. Fox.
This could be the quintessential 80s white suburban family. Like where maybe Brady Bunch was, the decade prior. This might be the family of the 80s.
Sure. I think you're right.
Yeah, might be. Yeah, and Alex P. Keaton was the best because he would always have a picture of like Richard Nixon, or he'd talk about his
Reagan,
love of Ronald Reagan.
Huge fan of Reaganomics. He was always wearing like his Ivy League sweatshirt, and like he was always like dressing business casual to go to high school.
Yeah. And his mom and dad were ex-hippies. I remember that.
Meredith Baxter played the mom, and Michael Gross played the father. Justine Bateman played Mallory, the sister. Tina Yothers played the younger sister. And then there was a baby. I have a Brian Bonsall here as the person who played the baby, which I vaguely remember. But yeah, the whole thing was that the mom was like a big like feminist, and then like Justine Bateman's like this 80s material girl, very consumerist driven kind of attitude. And Tina Yothers, the younger sister, I think she played Jennifer. She was always like a tomboy type. So she was the one that was probably more in line with the mom and dad's ideals, but it was very much a generational, like, Michael J. Fox and Justine Bateman's characters were very much against the hippie movement that the parents grew up in and probably tried to instill in them. They were very much rebelling against the parents' upbringing in that way.
I most remember Michael J. Fox and his friend Skippy. So whenever they did stuff together, I think that's when I was most interested in the show.
I feel like Skippy got into some shit, right? It was like a real like dramatic moment with Skippy. Doing drugs or something?
Oh yeah, there had to be a very special family. Next on a very special Family Ties. I would love when they do that. Next on a very special Mr. Belvedere. Like, come on.
Yeah.
Get your mother and father because there are adult themes.
If there are young children in the room, you may ask them to leave now. This is your warning. Family Ties also had some guest stars. Do you know any guest stars that popped up on there?
The one I remember, and only one I can remember, is Tom Hanks when he went in as the alcoholic cousin.
Yes.
And he drank the vanilla extract and he got drunk. And I was like, I didn't know you could do that. I see that in my mom's cabinet all the time.
That was your takeaway, huh?
That's what I learned from the fucking show.
Some other note, you're right, Tom Hanks was in there. That was a memorable episode. Other guest stars included River Phoenix, Corey Feldman, Will Wheaton, who we know from Next Generation, David Faustino, and his on-screen sister, Christina Applegate. They both had guest appearances on Family Ties. Julia Louis-Dreyfus, and also Crispin Glover, which is interesting because, of course, Michael J. Fox and Crispin Glover worked together closely on Back to the Future. So no coincidence there.
I don't remember any characters outside of the family and Skippy. How about that?
Number 5, we got Cheers, ran from 1982 to 1993. Of course, Cheers is the bar where everyone knows your name. We have Ted Danson playing Sam Malone, an ex-retired baseball player who's a bartender, and a whole cast of characters that are just regular old barflies that are in there cracking jokes and supporting each other. And, you know, it was a good show. There was a lot of good characters. Woody Harrelson got his start there.
Yeah, I think I watched this one since the beginning. I remember Coach.
Yeah.
I remember when Diane left.
What was Diane's real name?
Shelley Long.
Shelley Long. Yeah, she left because she was going to be a movie star. The only thing I can remember her from is Camp Beverly Hills, where she played a scout mom or like a Girl Scout leader.
Wasn't she in Money Pit? I think she was in Tom Hanks.
Oh, you're right. She was in Money Pit. You're right.
But I don't think I've ever seen that. If I did, I don't remember her.
So when Diane left, or Shelley Long left, rather, that brought along her replacement, Kirstie Alley. And that's where she got her start. That's where I remember seeing her anyway.
Can you imagine Shelley Long's anger when her movie career doesn't take off and then Kirstie Alley suddenly starts showing up in Look Who's Talking movies?
Yeah.
I mean, Shelley Long must have been impossible to live with. She would have been so furious. Man.
Careful what you wish for, man. But yeah, Cheers was good. I think Cheers, when I read the title of this article, I was like, well, Cheers is going to be number 1. Like, Cheers is the 80s show everybody talks about.
Yeah.
And, you know, I knew it was going to be on here. It was good. I really don't have a whole lot more to say about it. Definitely. Does it hold up? I don't know. It spun off Frasier. You know, there was some spin-offs in there. Rhea Perlman, she played a great character. A lot of good character actors started off there in Cheers.
Rhea Perlman had a husband. Do you remember the husband's name?
He was never on camera, but she would always talk about him.
No, he was on camera eventually because he got a spin-off.
Really?
And if anybody can remember the show, write in. Tell us what the name of it was.
I always liked John Ratzenberger's character, Cliff Clavin, and Norm at the end of the bar. They were always the comic relief, man. They were great. They were all had great comedic lines, really, but they all just played well off of each other. So it was definitely worth checking out. Number 4, something we talked about on here before, kind of alluded to it before with Marky Post. We have Night Court, ran from 1984 to 1992. We definitely talked about Night Court on here before. They're rebooting it, which I'm not watching, but followed Judge Harry Stone and his bailiffs, his defense attorneys, his prosecuting attorneys. They were all just fantastic group of characters. A really good feel-good show. Judge Stone was obsessed with Mel Torme. It's just a lot of good stuff. I remember John Astin was on one episode. I remember I was like, oh, that's
Gomez Adams.
It's Gomez Adams. Exactly right. I was like, this is fantastic. And like, it came out that he was like a little senile and I think he may have actually been Judge Stone's father or something like that, if I recall
It's
correctly.
ringing a bell.
Yeah.
I think I remember that.
Yep. So, I mean, it was a really good show. I really liked Harry Anderson, who played Judge Stone. Just
Yeah, he was a good guy.
great
Good character.
casting, good guy, great stories, good morals. He was always one that would like give the benefit of the doubt to the criminals, and like even some of his sentencing was like kind of quirky things, and it was just good. It was a good show.
It was a dorky show. Like
It
was
was.
really a geeky, dorky show, and I loved geeky, dorky humor. I still do. Like dad jokes are still my main comedy, as you can tell. So it's like I probably watched more Night Court than maybe I should have as an impressionable kid. But
I
it was
also
a great
love that
show.
he did magic. He always did
Yes.
magic as like
that was
his.
so cool.
It was great. I was like, oh, I wish I could do that. Like he would like, carry cards and like, smoke bombs and disappear and all kinds of goofy shit.
Pigeon would show up out of the blue. Like, he had a pigeon. How did he do it?
Number 3 here, Dynasty, ran from 1981 to 1989. I just know Dynasty was a nighttime soap opera. I didn't watch any of it. I could tell you nothing about it. Couldn't even sing you the theme song if I had a gun to my head, but it made number 3 on this list.
Yeah, same as Miami Vice. It was just too old for me, and it wasn't made for me, and I knew don't watch it because there's no superheroes, there's no machine guns, there's no aliens, there's nothing I like.
Well, you know what? Having said that, though, number 2 was not made for me, but I did watch a lot of this. Murder, She Wrote ran from 1984 to 1996. Surprised it ran that long, 12 seasons. Angela Lansbury played mystery writer Jessica Fletcher. And it seemed to me that wherever Jessica went, murder and crime followed, because all this woman did week after week was solve real-life murders. She had no jurisdiction. She was not a detective. She was just a mystery book writer who was very clever, and she would work with local police. And yeah, I watched this a lot with my grandparents.
The very last episode should have been they all find out that she was actually the killer all this time, writing false narratives to, get the cops off the scent.
That would have been fantastic.
Yeah. Hollywood, call me. I'm available for writing. I'm not part of the WGA. I'm a scab. Come on, give me a ring. So this was a Sunday night show for me. This was Sunday was a painful night because I hated school as a kid. I was a kid with anxiety. I was so afraid of Sunday nights. So things that came on Sunday night, Murder, She Wrote, 60 Minutes, whatever it was, like the adult stuff that I would see just gave me like, ugh, because it's Sunday night. Sunday nights didn't start getting better until Married with Children came on TV. But
Yes.
other than Married with Children, Sunday was the worst night for kids. And this is one of the reasons.
And you're absolutely right. This was a Sunday night show because we'd be at my grandparents' house for Sunday dinner. And would roll into this and the ABC Disney Movie of the Week. All these things gave me those feelings of like, well,
Yeah.
back to school tomorrow.
Absolutely. Once in a while, you'd get lucky, and the ABC movie of the week on that Sunday was like E.T. or something, something you could actually watch as a kid.
That's funny. I never actually made that connection of like that Sunday feeling with Murder, She Wrote until you just said that, but you're 100% right.
Oh, and then there was Matlock. That was another one.
Never watched Matlock. Well, last on this list, number 1, and this surprised me. I was surprised they picked this as number 1. Tales from the Crypt ran from 1986 to 1996. And this was a horror anthology series hosted by The Crypt Keeper, which was a puppet. This ran on HBO. They could run blue if they wanted. They sometimes did. But this was produced by Joel Silver, Richard Donner, and also Robert Zemeckis.
Oh, I didn't know they had that many names on this.
Yeah, there was actually a few more who I didn't recognize, so I didn't write them down. But they had called themselves The Crypt Crew.
This was on HBO. HBO wasn't something everybody had. It was pretty expensive. Not all houses had HBO. We were a Prism family. Prism is a channel that didn't make it, but if you lived in the area, you remember Prism. But HBO was not one of my channels, so yeah, I didn't watch any of this. And I remember they made a couple spin-off movies, and I was like, I don't care because I don't have HBO to watch the main show, so I'm not really interested in the spin-off movies. But to see that this is number 1 of the 80s, I'm not even sure big horror fans remember this that fondly. So I don't know about this one.
So we were not a premium cable family, but we would go to other families' houses that did have HBO, and this would come on, and I was like a scaredy kid. Like, I didn't want to watch scary things. The Crypt Keeper to me was always like that scary thing that when he popped up on the screen, we would change the channel to something else. Most of the show's content originated from a 1950s comic book of the same name. And it was very reminiscent of the Twilight Zone in that, like I said, it was an anthology. So like one story would have nothing to do with the next story. It was very much like the Twilight Zone in that way. And the guest stars on this thing, it was a who's who of 1980s fame. Let me pull up here. I couldn't even write this down because there are so many people in here that were guest stars of Tales from the Crypt. Probably most famous on here, Arnold Schwarzenegger was on here. Anthony Michael Hall, Judd Nelson. Kiwi Kwan was on here. Kirk Douglas, Brad Pitt, Brooke Shields, Catherine O'Hara, Cheech Marin, Christopher Reeve, Corey Feldman, Dan Aykroyd, Patricia Arquette, Arlie Ermey, Meatloaf, Leah Thompson, Lou Diamond Phillips, Michael J. Fox, Ted Danson, Steve Buscemi, Jada Pinkett Smith, John Astin again, Gomez Adams, John Lithgow, John Stamos, John Lovitz, Demi Moore, Don Rickles, Ewan McGregor, Iggy Pop was on here, Isaac Hayes again. We mentioned him doing a cameo in A-Team. Tom Hanks, we mentioned him doing a cameo in Family Ties. Tim Curry, Whoopi Goldberg, there she is given some of that Hollywood legitimacy. So there was so many people in this thing. Priscilla Presley, we got Elvis's wife on this thing. This was a crazy, star-studded anthology series, and yeah,
Is
it's
my
crazy.
name on there?
You're like the only one I'm not seeing here.
Damn it.
Billy Zane. Guess who else is on here? Bill Paxton.
I'm Bill Paxton.
Bobcat Goldthwait.
Well, that show was made to have guest stars. So,
Absolutely.
yeah. So that makes sense. But those are some great names.
Yeah.
All right. Let me school you. Movieweb.com. You missed a lot. And as I've been sitting here and Scott's been talking, I've been thinking about things you missed. I've been writing them down.
I have a few myself.
Let me run this list up by you. You tell me if you think any one of these should be in the top 15. Dukes of Hazzard.
I wrote that down myself. Ran from 1979 to 1985.
How the hell could that not be in there? The Cosby Show.
Oh, that is quintessential 80s, without a doubt.
Ridiculous that wasn't mentioned.
I have one.
What do you got?
MacGyver.
MacGyver.
Ran 1985 to 1992. You know that Henry Winkler was an executive producer of MacGyver?
No. I had
Yeah.
no idea. He really stayed in Hollywood. I love him. I love that he found jobs.
I love this write-up. MacGyver was the anti-James Bond. He was always in just as perilous situations, always against the odds, but never drank and never womanized, and he used his intellect rather than his gun to get himself out of situations. I never thought of MacGyver like that, but that's a perfect summary of what it was all about.
I just loved he could do with a paper clip and a Trident wrapper. He could make a satellite. It was really neat.
He knew physics, chemistry, engineering. He was a Swiss Army knife of a human being. In fact, he used a Swiss Army knife. I think most people knew about Swiss Army knives because of MacGyver.
All right, I'm going to run through this list. I'm just going to go. You can't stop me. Here I go. Named The Cosby Show, Dukes of Hazzard, 30-something. That was a big show. Moonlighting, that was a big show. Happy Days. Happy Days
was not 80s, though.
It was up till 84 when Fonzie jumped the shark. All of the greatest Happy Days moments happened in my childhood.
I'd say that's a 70s show. I'd say that's definitely a 70s show, though.
All right, I'll give you that one. The Wonder Years, that was a pretty big 80s show.
That was big.
People will forget Cagney and Lacey. That was pretty big.
Yeah.
I had to put this on. It wasn't that big, but Max Headroom, he was big. The show wasn't that big.
That was like an 89 thing, too. That was late 80s. How about Magnum P.I.?
Magnum P.I., I have it on the list.
Reading Rainbow? Oh, I mentioned that earlier. Yeah, that was a big 80s thing for kids.
I'm going to keep going. We're going to be here all day if I don't read this fast. Mork and Mindy, The Love Boat, Fraggle Rock, Designing Women.
No, Mork and Mindy was
Kate
70s.
Malley.
70s.
The Jeffersons. Who's the Boss?
70s.
Elsewhere.
80s was, okay.
Laverne and Shirley. I'll even say the Muppets had 2 years in the 80s, and I put them on the list.
No.
Dallas. Who shot
Dallas.
JR?
I have Dallas. I do have Dallas written down here. But some of those things you were rattling up, they were straight 70s, man.
False. All false. Magna PI, we talked about. WKRP at Cincinnati. Different Strokes. Facts of Life. Silver Spoons. Three's Company. Alf. Hill Street Blues. Married with Children. V. The show V. V. And Growing Pains.
Growing Pains, I agree with. But again, you rambled off like 6 or 7 straight 70s shows there, man.
Call in if you disagree. Call it. We don't have a number. Call 1-800-555-1212 if you disagree with Scott. Yeah, I think some of them are definitely straddled.
Now, I will say,
70s
I
and 80s
watched a
line.
lot of those things in the 80s, but they were not 80s shows. They were not representative of the 80s.
You know why I think you're right? Like, I look at the Jeffersons, and I know it ran in the 80s, but the reruns ran so much longer that there's probably many in here that I'm thinking are 80s shows. Like you say, Mork and Mindy wasn't. I'm probably remembering reruns in the 80s and thinking that it's an 80s show for that reason. Yeah, because, reruns were everywhere in the 80s.
Speaking of rerun, what about What's Happening Now?
Damn, how did that not make the list?
I think that was 70s too.
No Roger, no rerun, no rent.
Yeah, What's Happening was probably the 70s. What's Happening Now? That was the 80s.
I gave that a shot. That didn't. Nope, couldn't do it.
I love Shirley. He was
I
funny.
love Shirley. Everybody loves Shirley. Shirley Hemphill. But Roger, D, I couldn't stand D. Oof.
So there you have it. This was MovieWeb's article of 15 shows that defined the 80s. We disagree on some. We agree on some. We have some better recommendations that should have made the list, but these lists are all about. So if you agree, write in. If you disagree, write in.
Just write in.
Just write in. Start for an intellectual conversation.
All right, let's talk about some news. And I tried really hard, guys. I swear to God I did, to try to find something that wasn't about the strike, and everything's about the strike. So I thought there are 2 stories here, strike-related, that weren't absolutely redundant. So why don't we talk about Hollywood execs can't stop picking fights with each other. Did you hear about this?
No, I didn't.
The executives from major studios like Disney, Amazon, Netflix, and Warner Brothers are reportedly meeting to align their strategies and possibly mitigate the negative press surrounding their negotiations with the guilds, particularly the AMPTP's perceived failure to negotiate in good faith. The situation is described as quite dire, with the studios receiving a lot of bad press. The article suggests that the information might not be entirely reliable since it comes from industry trades that have close relationships with the studios. However, the ongoing reportings of squabbles amongst the big names in the industry indicates a generally poor perception of the studios during these strikes. So basically, nobody's getting along. They're trying to fight the other people, but they can't even get their own act together to fight the writers and the actors. Notable executives expected to attend the meeting include Disney's Dana Walden and a whole bunch of names. I'm just going to read who's showing up. Amazon Studios is going to be there. Netflix, Ted Sarandos, he's going to be there. Warner Brothers Discovery, we've talked about him. David Zaslav.
Yep.
So all these guys are going to go there, and they're going to try to figure out how they can work together and combat this. I mean, this is what you do when you're digging in for a really long fight.
This is a house divided, man. They cannot stand. They can't get their own shit together. How are they going to align? You know? They're not going to change the perception that's out there if they can't get a unified message together. I feel like they're cannibalizing each other. Shit like this is getting out. It's not going to end well.
Well, here's my next fun strike article. So this one is investors sue Disney for allegedly being sneaky about streaming costs. So it's like Disney doesn't have enough fucking problems. Bob Iger walks in. He's like, oh, Jesus, I better come in and save this. And now all these people strike. And now all of a sudden, the shareholders, who is the only people Bob Iger cares about, is now suing him because they think they've been feeding shareholders bad information about sales of Disney Plus subscriptions.
Okay.
Right? And if you're buying stocks, you're buying stocks on the guidance that they give when they're giving their quarterly updates. So if they're lying, you want to sue them because they tricked you into investing when you wouldn't have normally done it.
Is this a class action lawsuit? Because I am a Disney stockholder.
I don't know. It might become one. And all I can think of when I read this is somebody somewhere, something I read, and I wish I could remember it. I couldn't even find it again when I was thinking about this the other day, made the case that Bob Iger might just dump Disney.
Yeah, we talked about that before.
And this isn't worth it. If this doesn't make things even more worth dumping Disney, I don't know what will.
There's talk he's just going to sell it to Apple. But I do remember, like, way back in the day when they first announced Disney Plus launching, they were like, we want to be at this many by year 3. And all these stories came out saying, like, we have this many subscribers and we're like 2 years ahead of schedule. So there was certainly conversation about how subscribers and the longevity and the projections of what Disney Plus and Hulu, because then they bought Hulu when they did the Fox deal. They got 100% ownership of Hulu, or majority ownership of Hulu, I guess it was. Yeah, it really seemed like that was their goal of the future. And now he starts talking about how, like, yeah, it's not that profitable. Like, we're really losing money on this whole thing. Subscription costs are going up monthly now. Like, we talked about that before. So it really was a, wait a minute, but here's what's really happening. Now you're going to have to pay attention to the man behind the curtain, because the smoke and mirrors I was showing you before of how good we were doing, that is what these stockholders are saying. Like, we bought into the smoke and mirrors. And now that push comes to fucking shove and the strike's happening and you're saying, like, well, hey, there's not that much money here. We're actually upside down on this. What is the real story? Because that is bait and switch.
Well, I'm going to put a bet out there. Anybody who's listening can take me up on it. Nobody's going to end up happy at the end of this thing.
Yep. You keep saying that, and I don't see any way to say that you're wrong, because the landscape's going to be a lot different when all this dust settles. That's for damn sure.
We can't end on a good note until the news gets better, guys. Nothing we can do. But we want to thank you for listening. We'll be here next week. TooMuchCGI.com. You know, we love when you leave comments, even when you rate us. If you want to rate us, you can go to ratethispodcast.com/TooMuchCGI, and it'll take you to all the places you can rate us. I'm saying rate, R-A-T-E. You can rate us, and that will help us in the algorithms. Don't spin your drinks, guys. Yeah.
I'm not down for that.
We're not afraid of being rated well, so we boost the algorithm and show up for more people. The show is growing. It's really cool to see the numbers grow every week, and we want to keep it going. So would love your help. Anything, you guys want to hear from us, tell us.
Yeah. Appreciate any recommendations for content. Aside from, even easier than rating us, just tell a friend about us. Turn somebody else onto the show. Helps get the numbers up, really helps us. And again, like Bill said, definitely fun to watch these numbers very sharply increase here lately. So much appreciated. Thanks everybody for listening.
Tickle, tickle, tickle. Tickle, tickle, tickle. Tickle, tickle, tickle.